Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of My Stoic Circus. And today we're going to talk about why you should never whine about your position. That's right. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the topic of whining and what is in the act of complaining is feeble and petulant manner of making you look a high or making a long or high pitched cry or sound. It's important to recognize that our everyday complaints can lead us into a state of being that is not really working for us. So this episode is to focus on how the negative effects on whining, complaining on our well-being hinders our personal growth. So stay tuned here in just a moment. All right, everybody, welcome in. And it's great to be here on Sunday morning, My Stoic Circus. I didn't get to post the episode yesterday. There were some things that I needed to attend to that were more of a personal matter and just needed to clear that out so I can make an episode today. Anyhow, so this is something that's been in my life where I feel that I needed to really attend to and be able to look at how can I improve my station in life. And I have done a lot of complaining and whining in my life. I have sometimes, or I should say, at times, envied or been jealous, didn't make things happen for myself. I didn't do things that were working, and I was counting what someone else had in their pockets and being disgruntled about what they had and looking at what I had. So not really appreciating the value of what you have today for yourself versus what others have. Or maybe you're stuck in a rut, in a position, serving in a role that doesn't really suit you anymore. You're only accepting it because it facilitates something. So how do we actually get in the rhythm of complaining, and how can we turn it around? That's really what today's episode is going to be all about. So as I started personally reflecting yesterday, I wanted to look at how we get into this being of complaining. Complaining's easy, so pretty much any one of us can do it, and we have done it at some point in our lives. And to say that we haven't, I would say that you're not really looking at yourself carefully. So what is a complaint? When we don't agree, when something bothers us, right? So the Google definition says a statement that is a situation of unsatisfactory or unacceptable. But it is an illness or medical complaint, especially relevant to a minor one. So it's interesting to see what a complaint is, so to speak, on that. But where do we tend to complain at? Usually it's about an event. It's about an experience, a direction in which people are doing or something is happening, a person or persons. So like gossip, a role that we're in, a rule or set of rules, and your station in life. I think it's very important to know where complaining takes place, easiest and the most. So those are what I've come up with and what I've written about. What does complaining do? Many times it's negatively indicating a direction or stopping or paralyzing, or it shows your options of actions. Now, that's very important. Your options of actions. Is your complaint doing something to change a direction or status of what something actually is? Like if I go and talk about another creator, or I complain about that I'm not getting activity or noticing in my podcast, am I not making enough money? Why are things not changing in my life? And once you go down that slippery slope, it indicates what is actually taking place. But it takes thinking. That's a very, very important thing. Um, does it indicate your next steps? It can. Complaining tends to show what you're doing. And how it shows it is like, is your emotional frailty up? Is your place in life stuck because you just can't solve the problem of how to elevate? Let's imagine you're a worker in a restaurant, which I've been, and you wanted better shifts, or you wanted to become a manager, but you never got the option. It could be because you're complaining about not getting the option instead of trying to resolve what does it take to become a manager or a leader, so to speak. So it really indicates the lack of your intentional being, the lack of your intentions to resolve whatever issue, problem, or obstacle that's in your way. How complaining as an act shows your options, whether you'll fix the problem or not. Complaining and whining does require for you to think. Just remember, in order to complain, you have to think and discern and describe, and then it's a choice. Do I deliver it outwardly? Do I say it? And once you're in a pathway of complaining and it doesn't get resolved, then you get to what's called whining. You know, what is whining? Well, let me real quickly define whining as a definition. It's the making of a long, high-pitched cry or sound, or it's making a characterization that's elongated, right? So, what's the easy example of whining? When you see a little one not getting what they want, they go to a store and they throw themselves down on in the aisle for not getting their toy or candy or whatever. And I'm sure I've done it, and many kids, my kids have done it. Um, but it doesn't resolve by making that high pitched sound. For the parents, it tends to embarrass us and we get angry. It drives out an emotion, for many of us. But then how does it stop? Eventually, your parents will tell you, stop it, or you'll get a punishment, however that punishment may be. And it's interesting about how it evolves later in adult life. We will say things so that we don't want, but we sometimes speak under our breath. We complain. We're thinking things. Why isn't am I not? Don't I deserve this opportunity? Why does this guy seem to get the girl, or why does this woman seem to get the right guy, or vice versa, or whatever, however you see it? But you're going to have to decide of that initial movement of your thoughts moving you into a negative direction. You have to really consider, like, I'm in a movement of complaint. And if I start voicing it out, I could be whining and stop instead of looking about what can I do to better my position in life, my role, how I take care of my body, how I take care of my mind. Um, Not people pleasing, not chasing after approval. And this happens a lot in our lives. We make submissions, and we also make allowances. We kind of like give it a pass just to get the attention, but yet to keep the attention, it takes much more work and value. And that's where a lot of relationships fail, is because what you initially started out with maybe have not been the truth, or a role that you cannot keep up. Let's just say if someone dates another person and they posture up and they take you to nice dinners, but they can't afford to keep up that way of living. Is that bad on the person? It could be. It very well could be. And I know I've done it before. What got me attention kept me attention until the source ran out. So you know, what are you now seeing about yourself? Is it a sense of actions? Is it a sense of acceptance that you are not moving forward? You're not really taking consideration about how things can improve, but or maybe it's something that doesn't belong to you. I remember I was listening to a TikTok where Ice Cube basically says, "Why are you complaining about the work that you never did? You can't cash a check for the work that you didn't do. Why are you counting someone else's holdings in their pockets? Have you improved your station?" Now, there are exceptions, right? However, most of the time, there is a choice in what we live with and what we can do and how we can benefit in our own lives. So, how do we do all that? What are steps that, that make a difference? And I wrote a lot of these down. How can we turn it around, so to speak? The first one is look at what is in your control. That's right. Epictetus would say, look at what's in your control. So your word is number one. Your word coming out of your mouth, or whether you're typing it or expressing it, whatever. What comes out of your mouth, or what's decided in your mind. So look at those two things right away. Second thing, look at your sphere of influence. That's right. Many people talk about, show me the company that you keep, and I'll show the tendencies of who you are and how you're going to act. The act of a group will show about how people live and how they are going to do and how they decide, how they create their beliefs. So when you look at your sphere of influence, it could be religion, it could be business, it could be your desire to be wealthy. What do you allow, that gets in that may not be working for you? Look at that sphere of influence. Number three, understand your training. That's right, your training, everything that you may have been raised with or how you got to this point. It doesn't matter at what age you are, but the hardest thing that we ever have to accept is that the training that we have for the beliefs and so on and so forth. And matter of fact, I wrote something very impactful for me. And I was also again watching TikTok, and I was watching the Shaolin monk. He was talking about, in order for something new to come, something old must go. And that old can mean that old something letting go, or mean that old something can mean letting go of what you know and empty your cup of life so that you can start beginning to pour in a new cup, or pouring into your cup of life. Your experience doesn't mean that it wasn't warranted, but it may not be working. So you have to understand that looking at what you pour into and how things are poured into you, how you use it. So, it's like, imagine you have a tea party and you pour your guests cold tea, right? And they don't drink. Well, there's a reason for it, because it's cold. It's not something that they, in their minds, would get accustomed to. But if you told people in advance, like, look, there's a new method of drinking tea, and I'd like to share it with you if you'd like to take a part of it, then they're aware. But traditionally, what they've been trained with is that tea must be hot, unless it's iced tea. That's like a simple summer beverage that a lot of us here share in America. So, I'm sure that other people share it around the world too. So I don't want to be, biased, but I see more iced tea mentioned in the US than I do anywhere else, you know. So to get back on top of it, thinking about, imagine all the things that you've poured into your cup and you've had to restart your life. You've had to decide what has worked, maybe partially doesn't work anymore. Willingness to dump out everything that doesn't work takes a huge amount of courage. It takes a huge amount of strength, discipline that has to be developed, a new line of thinking, and acceptance. Probably the most important part of all of this is the way that you're going to accept, you know? And so none of us want to feel like we're wrong or we have to start our lives over again. It's You're never starting your life all over again. You're starting a movement of things that do not work, and it's going to take time sometimes, or it's going to take a new line of thinking, a group of people to be around. So when you're having to start your life over, as you may metaphorically call, that may mean abandoning certain people and beliefs, and it may be morally testing you. But if you do it incrementally every single day, you train on this. This is why Stoics believe in training. As a Stoic myself, I am constantly training. It doesn't mean that I don't have emotions, but it means that I'm going to look at my best living today. And I like what a lot of the new living stoics say. It's like it's not about not having emotions. It's about, you know, taking your emotions and delivering them in the best possible way so that you can enjoy your life. A lot of people think that stoics don't have they just emotionless. No, it's just the opposite. They're full of emotions, and they've deciphered and they decided to express how can we actually train human beings to live better, right? So moving on, where did I leave off of? Understand your training. That's right. I did kind of talk about that, and that means abandoning, yeah, sometimes your position, maybe what you've always done. Think about this. A lot of people nowadays are having to redefine their roles of living, where they work, who they have relationships with. There is a huge outcry from people in an indirect way of saying, we need to understand how to build relationships. Marriages are on the decline. People are more selfish. And look at your asset evaluation. They're not connecting. They don't know how to connect other than to evaluate what is in your possession that they can enjoy off of you instead of with you. So look at that. The next big part of all this is making conscious choices. This is probably the most difficult of them all. Understanding your conscious choices always has results, whether you like it or not, whether you're doing something or not doing something. So when say, like, if you're wondering why your world is crumbling, but yet you spend most of your time, say, like in spheres of influence, like social medias, or um, not developing a skill that will, help you become a better person, to work in a more upgraded way, to get paid for your strategy, your mindset, your creativity. You can't increase your station unless you're willing to accept and understand what is in your control and what is not in your control. And if it's something that stays, it's meant to be. If it's something that leaves you, it wasn't meant to be. So the Stoics really talk about, how to deliberate on that, and I encourage you to read things like Meditations and Discourses by Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. So here is one aid that I think that will help more people more often. Listen to learn, not to react to. More times in most relationships, whether it's business or personal, when you find someone who is interrupting you, no matter what it is, the engagement is their reaction is telling you that they're stopping their engagement. They are now objecting to you and they're not willing to learn. Take time to observe and listen to what they say, not to defeat them, not to beat them, but they are addressing a grievance, sometimes knowing what they're doing and not knowing. And that's where arrogance comes into play. A lot of discussions I've been into or I've heard on, say, like Clubhouse and other places, there's a lot of arrogance and assumption taking place. But what is actually workable and a fact? So you got to understand that, you know, and if you want, say, many of us want, I just want a peaceful living, I want a happy living. Well, the amount of adjustments that's going to require you to make to have that living is you're going to have to create discipline that works. That's right. It's not something you decide that, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to stop eating junk food. And then yet 3 days later you quit because you gave in, you were tired, you didn't have exercise, you didn't have rest, you didn't have, maybe your position in life is like you resorted to fast food again. But what did you do in preparation? And that could be indicating of what your choice of actions are. Peace is hard work. So you got to understand what the Stoic virtues are. That means wisdom. That means developing knowledge that works, right? Temperance. That means having patience and understanding of when to act, not to act, when to take it personal and not to take it personal. Courage. That means to take the risk out of your current state of being And it means sometimes that you're going to have to defy others. It means that you're really going to look at what you're complaining or whining about means that you're stuck, and you're going to have to see yourself with it. And what you do next may anger people. It may not agree with people. A lot of things that I've done didn't agree with people. And that doesn't mean to be ignorant of what people could be telling you, but it means taking a chord that you're going to have to work on the adjustments for yourself. You know, look at the disciplines that you develop. Get rid of. Here's one of the biggest ones that I want to share is get rid of the expectations of others. And that's probably the hardest part for me is, when I've been growing up, my parents didn't attend to me. They attended more to their problems. And then when they split up, they didn't work together to help make us. And so they left us to our own discernment and our devices, not teaching emotional, intelligence, how to be a mentor, a guide, and become an adult. So what happens is we develop these tremors and traumas. That's right, traumas for triggers later in life. How you get offended by something or not get offended. It's going to be up to you. And when we speak, I know one of the instances where I learned was um, I explain a lot in conversations. I dictate. I'm more of a teacher in conversations than integrated in conversations. And what did that result? Because maybe when I was a kid, or more likely when I was a kid, I wasn't heard, I wasn't respected, I wasn't taken consideration. So it developed a condition in my life for later that I would do that. But to get back to why you should never whine about your position, it involves all those things that I mentioned. Whining does not get you anywhere. It tends to show that you are in a stuck position, and people will ignore you. They will maybe pay attention like a car wreck on the side, like, oh, I'll look at that and then I'm moving forward. Are you going to take that and learn from it? So, anyhow, I'm going to bring some guests up to my stage and see what they think. I'm in Clubhouse Live. So if you guys would care, hey, Caroline and James, how you doing? Good to see you guys this morning. Is there anything you guys would like to share, or what you've thought about what I've talked about, thus far? Is that something that you would agree with, disagree with, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not a big fan of complaining. My grandmother used to always say, worrying and complaining are like sitting on a rocking chair on the porch. All you're doing is rocking back and forth and never getting anywhere, and just sitting and wallowing in self-pity.
Right. I agree with that. It does, but it also shows you there's an issue that you may or may not be able to resolve. And do you need to attend to it, right? Or would you agree with that?
No, 100% it needs to be attended to. We've had this conversation before. My life really didn't begin until I became homeless, and I learned to take ownership of everything that was going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts, my words, and my actions.
Right. Caroline, would you like to add anything to the conversation, or any thoughts, that something that you've learned or something I discussed about complaining or whining?
Good morning, Jason. Good morning, everybody. I don't really see myself as a complainer. Now that I don't work outside the home, any complaints I would have are probably considered minor to other people. So I don't really have areas in my life to complain about, but I try not to complain unless I know that by doing so, by complaining about something, that something could be done to make sure it doesn't happen to me in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did work outside the home as a director of nursing, I took complaints from people on a daily basis, from visitors, from patients, from staff. So what I would do is, investigate, learn from the complaint, see what can be done to make sure it doesn't happen again. But yeah, I think if you're going to complain about something, then you should take it to management to get it resolved. If it's a situation like that, if it's personal, if you're going to complain, do so constructively for constructive criticism and try to see what can be done to resolve it.
Okay. So there are situations that in workplaces where you do exactly that. My first question would be, did you exhaust all methods that you possibly can think of to resolve the problem or the issue? Did you do that? And also, whining, complaining can be talking about your traumas and your stresses over and over. There's a large group of people in the world that cannot get unstuck because the traumas and reminders take place so often that they have not let go. That also takes place often. Say, like, if it's a brother, a sister, a friend who did you dirty, right? And let's say you're in a small community, and say like a small town. You see them, you see the problem, you see what they've done. But every time you're around them, or let's just say the frequency that you're around these people causes you to feel uncomfortable, to react, to want to say something, look at a negative glare or smirk, or when people ask you about who is this person to you and why are you so upset? It's up to you at that point to say, if I relate this information, if I relate this, what is the effect? What is the result that I'm going to leave them with? Not just about that person they describe, but also about yourself. You could be seen as, wow, you got issues, you got problems. Maybe you should go see a psychiatrist, or maybe you should take meds. People will adopt phrases for inadequacies. Whenever someone, and I said it before, whenever you're talking with anyone, a group of people or a person, when you say something that may not agree with them and they're impulsively talking over you, did you think that they were listening to you, or they were listening for points to react to? That could take place and it happens all the time. Get in a discussion about, let's say, politics, get in a discussion about health, get into a discussion about music or movies or how people should treat each other. When you think about what actually takes place when people complain, it's how they tell their story and whom they're telling their story. Maybe you could be telling, well, how a man or woman did you wrong for so long, and here it is 20 years later. Who's the one with the problem, you or them? It also shows that what you can accept and can't accept. You have not learned from your station in life. You've gotten yourself stuck. So that's where it comes to, when I was talking earlier about emptying your cup, this Shaolin monk that I caught a clip from, and he says, in order for something new to come, something old must go. Let it go, you know, and that means that letting it go, to understand, to know, means that you're gonna have to put some action. Maybe your beliefs, maybe your religion, maybe your culture taught you how to be, but it really keeps you stuck. Abandoning that information and those beliefs may be the most difficult personal thing that you can do. See, like walking away from family that could be, as they say, narcissistic or toxic, or walking away from the friends that you always had to improve your station. A lot of times people will just make excuses and they'll keep it going. So we have to understand that, whining about your situation it's like making a song of complaints, and it gets annoying. But does it annoy you? By doing it, when you see a child like, oh my God, you should buy me my candy, and I don't know, and you don't understand. It's like when you get into that point, that high pitch gets annoying to everybody else. But do you understand where you're annoying? Good morning, Miss C or Chloe. How are you doing this morning? Thanks for coming in. I appreciate you. Wendy, I also see you in the audience. Samar and Servago, thank you also for coming in. So, just to catch you guys up to speed, we're talking about why you should never whine about your station or people, why you should never complain about your station in life. And I did bring up the comment that Ice Cube said, like, why are you complaining about work you never did for checks you cannot cash? If you didn't do the work, then why do you deserve it? To cash it, or that you should feel like, hey, this is the justice. So it's definitely things about that. Chloe, I know you just came into the room. Was there anything that how you treat whining or complaining, or what you think about it? How do you stop yourself, or do you ever catch yourself complaining or whining? Let me just ask that.
Well, I mean, complaining is when you repeat it over and over again, right?
It could be, or it could be once. It could be once.
There's a difference between like airing your gripes and talking about your feelings and your frustrations and then complaining. Do you know what I mean? Like, and there's also like the way somebody talks about their problems. So, for example, I'm pretty. I don't want to bring anyone down with my shit because I know that everybody else has their own to carry, and actually, nobody really wants to hear it either. Do you know what I mean? So, and then you usually find with the people that do whine a lot that they don't have, their social circle shrinks and the universe gives them things to whine about. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, you want to whine? Here's some stuff to whine about. And then, you start getting invited to places, people stop wanting to hang out with you, people moan about you to each other. You basically become that thing that you create that thing. Whiners, luckily I don't have any of those people in my circle because I have zero tolerance for bullshit. I mean, obviously, if my friend's going through something, she needs to talk it out, then that's fine because that's how you process things. But if somebody just constantly goes on about the same thing and does it, I'm going to just take myself away and not want to be around that person. And, I likewise, if I hear gossip and somebody's talking about somebody else, like I will just shut down and be like, okay, I don't want to hear this. Why don't you go and talk to them? Because I just find it unnecessary and, it's just toxic. I don't want to use the word that, everyone bans around, but it is toxic. It doesn't make people feel good to hear it. It doesn't make you feel good. You could talk about people that have long-lasting health conditions. Mm-hmm. And, I've been suffering with some health stuff myself over the last 2 years, and it's bloody boring. Do you know what I mean? It's boring to go through. It's boring to hear about it, and nobody wants to know. And people say, "How are you?" I'm fine, but really,
my question to that is, how did you learn it was boring?
Because you listen to it in other people and you think, God, I don't want to sound like
that.
Oh God.
Would you say the reactions of others told you or gave you a signal that this is not a good thing?
More so about how I feel when people do that around me. And I just think, I don't want to make anyone else feel like that, so
have people whine and complain to you, and then that's how you begin to develop that decision point making.
Yeah, exactly. Step away from the drama.
That's the action, like that's the healthy action, right? So you decide like, okay, well, they're in this frequency, maybe they're just going through a spat. I mean, it could be temporary, or this,
and then you give them the doubt. But if that's their story that they want to hold on to all the time, then then I'm going to step away from them as a friend. I'm sorry, I wish you well and sending you all the love, but I've got my own stuff that I'm not burdening you with, and the fact of the matter is when you have very close friends, like you're really close, then, that's your place, your safe space where you can talk about your stuff and whatever else. But majority of the time, nobody actually wants to hear that stuff. They want to hear the good stuff, or they just want to talk about themselves.
That's another thing that's something I discussed earlier this week is 5 toxic traits in personality. The people that are self-indulged all the time, they don't want, like, say, like if you're saying something, like you say, like you just had a great concert, right? And then you say something that may have been like this was an obstacle and I'm trying to overcome it, and then someone comes in and they say, oh, I had the same thing, and then starts explaining about their situation and loses the context of the conversation. That is to me like a joy robber. I've done that. I'm guilty of that.
I mean, we've all, I've definitely been guilty of that. I'll hold my hands up. But you know, the only reason I would probably do that is to sort of like let that person know that I've been there, and I know I'm trying to let them know that I understand where they're coming from. But you know, it probably doesn't come across like that. It probably looks like you're just trying to piggyback and be like, "Hey, I've had a problem too. What about me?" You know, but that's not where I'm coming from.
So what
But it's
would
good
be
to
a
be aware.
positive thing to respond to that? Would that be like, instead of just empathizing and saying a story and a point, or could you say, you know what? I understand where you're coming from, and leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's just so
Or you could just
short.
say,
Like I get where.
yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that. But like, I'm sorry that you're going through that. You know, like that's just kind of under that sort of umbrella. You know, rather than
I think that's
making
where
it about.
something I kind of differ now, because I've been so ingrained and trained to saying I'm sorry, and apologizing for what they're going through. And I'm like thinking, is my apology really the right thing? And that's why I'm saying I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I mean, it depends on the situation, of course, you know.
Yeah. Because like I think that people who habitually train themselves into traumas, and they say, well, my sister did this to me all these years, and I have to continue and using that example of how I'm suffering with my sister, or maybe my
That
parents.
becomes part of, I think
Yeah.
that becomes some part of some people's identity.
Yeah, it does. I think
That's their story.
yeah, I think it's a big part of it. I think it's, to my understanding, I see people who have forgotten who they actually are, but they've made this whole billboard of living about that brief period of time in your life. Think about all the years. I've lived 50 years. And has there been something that I've complained about? Yeah. My bad relationships, not
Yeah.
being married, how someone cheated on me, or how I did somebody wrong. And you stay in that pathway, and guess what? It does not get better. So what is your choices?
No.
You stop complaining about it, or stop whining about it, and look at what are you doing differently today? What actions are you doing now? That's really what it comes.
Exactly.
And that's
Well,
why
I'm a bit harsh with that. I'm on that sort of tip of, you know, I know you've got a problem, but sitting here talking about it isn't going to solve it. What are you going to do about it?
right. Because the problem
You
just tells you what's the wrong, what's the objection, what you don't
Yeah.
accept.
Yeah, and if I'm feeling like quite straight, you know, normally I would. If it depends on the situation, but I would usually just say that. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? You know, just sort of like cut them off halfway. And, okay, what are you going to do about this? And get them into thinking about actions and how they can get out of that situation, which is obviously much more positive, because then you're thinking about, you know, solutions and, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know what also I notice in society today, in American society especially, and other cultures, I see people complaining about how hard things are before they've even attempted or done anything. They go according to hearsay. What they see is difficult according to their experience that may be associated with those things. More or less, I see objections because their experience told them I had to do hard work. But believe it or not, hard work reveals how far you're willing to go. I was watching a documentary last night on Steph Curry on Apple TV, and he was talking about, there was a period of time when he was a kid and he was constantly missing shots. If he wanted to get to the pros, his dad told him you had to change your way of shooting because you're smaller. And that's just it. And can you accept that? And that's going to be hard, but there is a living where people say, something is hard, and you automatically hear in their words and their living, their breath, that they're immediately stopping. They're not going to intentionally go forward. But for those of us who challenge ourselves and say, you know what, I'm willing to find out what I don't know. I'm willing to go the next step. I'm willing to give it my best, even in the light of I may not succeed, not the first time, second time, it may take 50 different attempts, but it only takes one time to complete something, to say it's done. It can be done again. So, any thoughts on that? Do people complain to you about how hard things are? Do you see them stopping because they've over anticipated? Either one of you care to answer?
I don't see people sort of, I mean, obviously life in Britain in England has changed quite dramatically. So a lot of people are pissed off, and they are valid about the things that they're moaning about are pretty valid, like our healthcare system on its knees, and the government just being complete shysters, which is no new news really, because they all are, do you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's kind of like, when it affects people's life and they're all in it together, I guess they feel like they can complain a bit more because people identify with it and they also feel the same way, then I suppose in a way that's different.
Right. And people have the right to address their grievances, right? When you have a grievance, it is a complaint initially, but it's something that but it is something they want to take a part of the process, whether it be voting or finding the people that are elected to address them with questions to get them to do actions, making influences. Look at your sphere of influence. If people are not, say, like going after a local lord or governor or regent, and they completely ignore and they're speaking out, and that regent is like looking at re-election, well, he has a couple of choices: either keep doing what you're doing or change and see what the people want and make choices. So if you're the healthcare system in England, you know, I hear a lot of my friends in the UK tell me about that the authorization process is really long. It's over exaggerated.
Everything's taking on.
And I could understand that, because even over here, the same thing happens. Like, I got into a car accident over a week ago, and just to get an MRI, I've had to wait for my health insurance to tell me what's wrong with my nerves in my back and in my arm. And it was pain, and it's like, you're giving me medications, but you're not solving the problem. It's like, get me to the people that can solve the problem. And that means, let's look at the image. Maybe there is inflammation in an area that needs to be adjusted. It could be surgery. It could be physical therapy. It could be lots of things, but taking a drug or a thing doesn't resolve your pain or your hurt or your injury. It takes understanding. And I think that can relate to so many things in our lives. We have to look at what can we actually fix and what we cannot fix. And there are definitely problems that don't necessarily belong to us. Many times I see people attending to things that do not concern them. It's the gossip, the nose effect. Once you start voicing out your problems and your complaints to people, guess what? It now becomes their problem too, if they answer to it. That's the key word: if you answer to what's taking place. So I see some comments in the chat. Wendy says that can come across very dismissive if it's not sincerely said. Okay. Samar says sometimes people need to whine because they are really having a hard time. They don't know how to process. Sometimes they need to help, how to share, and how to shift their perception.
That's actually exactly. We said that, didn't we? We said that it's different if you've got you're upset about a problem that you're trying to process. We were talking about the people that just whine all the time, who just do it and it becomes their story. Like, for example, I know this woman, and she's had a lot of health stuff, and I totally get it. I've had a lot of health stuff, and it's hard not to whine when your health is shit all the time and you feel crap, and it just gets you down. And I totally empathize with that, because I've been going through a bit of that myself. But at the same time, it's coming on Clubhouse or whenever I see anyone, if I just opened out with, I've been having acid reflux for the last year, and it's just boring. It's negative. It's downer. Like, I don't want to lead with that.
Do you want to hear about how the person's burping up their stomach fluids all the time? I sure don't.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Do I want to hear if you have a constant bowel movement that comes out running? No, I don't.
Nobody wants to know that stuff.
No,
but, at the
sorry,
same time,
TMI.
you kind of need to be. But your friends need to be aware that if you're being a bit irritable, that's why. Do you know what I mean? So in a way, it's kind of like giving people heads up. But at the same time, you don't need to go on about it. I've got a friend, well, she's not a friend, she's a friend of a friend. And every time you see her, she's going to moan. Oh, and I can't even deal with it. I just avoid her at clubs and parties. I just go the other way. because I understand that she's having difficult stuff, but she's always got something difficult going on, and then that becomes like tedious, and that's when I just start avoiding people. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
And Samar also says, I'm not talking about someone who whines all the time because they need attention. People who are having a hard time, it is good for them to share their struggles to a close friend. This is something very important. And this is where I have really taken constant present thinking about that. Not all my friends are competent or capable of dealing with my problems. Me voicing it out to my friends could be the worst possible thing to do. Um, a lot of times where I hear it is relationship issues. If you're going to go and complain, let's say you're having a problem in your relationship, but you complain about to a person who's been single for 20 years. What makes you think they're going to understand what you deal with? Right? Maybe they don't like having relationships. They think that relationships are taxing and have too much attachments of not living your best self. That could also be. But that doesn't mean they don't understand the problem. It just means that they may not be the most competent for the problem, and maybe they might show you insight, but I don't want to share all my problems, my intimacy problems to my friends. I'd rather keep that to myself. It's very important. Your struggles are indication of how you process your choices. Not that you're a bad person, but if you're constantly complaining, kind of like your friend Chloe, like you were saying, if you're in that position or that person who never, they're a negative Nelly or nagging Bob, whatever. And all they do is, oh my God, it's like the Eeyore complex. Okay, I'm sorry, Chloe. Life is so bad for you, but I'm having such a hard day because I don't have energy. That tone right there kills conversations, And so what do people do? They buy things to compensate their time or their emotions. More people create debt out of problems that they refuse to fix or refuse to accept. A lot of times, where you're at in your life indicates where your lack of decision making to go forward is. What do you accept? What is in your control? And there's a couple things that you control. You control the words that come out of your mouth, and you control the thoughts in your head. That means it tells whether your impulses are delivered or not. Maybe your impulsive thought, like, if you ever seen that movie Inside Out by Disney, and it talks about the different emotions, and when one emotion is like wants to pull the trigger of how the body reacts or what it expresses, it's like when the anger gets out of control, what damage does it create? But also, is there a healthy way of expressing your anger? Yes, there is. Frustration, there is reward sometimes in expressing a frustration, but how you express it, what you deliver it, and where you're delivering it to. So not all friends or family are capable. Ask yourself, give yourself some time. I think that's the biggest part. Give yourself a few days, you know. Let's see. I have Sally Mary saying there are people who don't always know that they're whining and need to be told. That's a big one. Oof. Mm. That one, I'm it's like what needs to be addressed. So if I'm listening to someone whining and complaining, let's just say whining specifically. Um, I have the choice now to say, all right, well, I've heard your complaint. There's nothing I can personally do about it. I understand that you're uncomfortable. I'd like to stop listening to it. Can we move on? That sounds very direct, very strict, but it's also indicating that now you're becoming uncomfortable with their uncomfortability. And so, Chloe, you said earlier that I'll walk away. there's times you have to walk away and not entertain.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, self-preservation, your boundaries. But it also tells you that if you're complaining about something, say like you bring up a complaint about someone, unwarranted, you're in an area, like you're at a party, and someone comes out of the blue and tells you an issue in front of company, it tends to tell you that where their position is, they may be holding on to the problem a lot longer than you are. They may be dealing with the issue than you. Is there appropriateness? And that means there are times where you need to have a private conversation and not a discussion amongst other people. And gossip tends to show that a lot, because once someone tells a problem in front of other people, it becomes their problem.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem of the group. Go ahead.
I think gossip is just as toxic to listen to as it is to speak. And if you listen to gossip, you're almost you're enabling the gossiper to carry on sharing their toxic stuff. And what it is misery loves company, and they're trying to get you on side, so you'll kind of gang up against this person. So if somebody comes to me and starts going, oh, and especially if this person's somebody that I don't know or care for, then it's even then I'm still a bit like, don't really need to hear it. And this is it's different if somebody's gone through something and they're telling me that like they're trying to process something that they've been through with someone, and someone's been a certain way and they're just sharing the information they need to share because they're having a tough time. That's different. But if somebody's like gossiping just to besmirch people, I usually shut that down straight away. I'm like, look, sorry, I don't need to hear about that. I'm here for a good time, not a long time. If you've got a problem with that person, you need to go and talk to them, because it's not gonna, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's something that I realized that I've done even recently. Matter of fact, the last couple of days, I was realizing I was irritated with another person. I told others that where I was bothered by somebody else's choices, because they interrupted my life for their complaint. And now it's like a contagious disease. Gossip can be valuable too at the same time, because also it can indicate who they are. And there is times where I do listen to gossip, and it lets me know, do I want to continue that relationship or not? So I've had that happen.
Definitely.
So
well, I usually look at the person who's talking more negatively than I do about the person they're talking about, because I always think, oh, where's that coming from? Are you trying to get me on side? Oh, that doesn't work for me, especially if the other person hasn't said anything, like that that's a kind of a big indicator. And I think I've been in I've had some negative relationships in the past. I'm sure we all have. And the ex-partner in particular that I'm talking about, we split up after he was verbally, emotionally abusive, and then we split up, and he went into my friendship circle that I brought him into and told everybody I was horrible to him. I left him for somebody else. And everyone rallies around him going, oh my God, poor guy. Meanwhile, I just got on with my life. I didn't tell anybody anything. But this group of friends who I thought were friends all rallied around him. They didn't phone me up to see if I was okay and to see, how I was doing. They just sort of rallied around him. So I just kind of thought, right, okay, fine, that's fine. And then I saw that group of friends, and they all told me what had been said. Oh, so you're okay then? You've gone off with your ex. I was like, what? And this kind of brings attention to the situation. What I'm trying to highlight here is the fact that the person speaking doesn't necessarily need to be the innocent party or the victim. They could be the perpetrator. That's why it's so. You have to be so careful with that sort of stuff, because you could be getting all rattled and rolled up about something that somebody's telling you, and it could just be them trying to manipulate the situation to make themselves look innocent.
Yeah, that could be very well. Samar, you said quite a lot in the chat. Would you care to come up and express what you just said? She said, I have a friend who had a rough time in rough life, and yes, she whines, but we decided in our once a week coffee time to give her 10 minutes to whine about her life and then stop. All what she needs is to vent out. Okay, so that is something that, you gave someone an allowance, a time. All right. How do you want to complain about this? We're going to listen to everything. We're not going to offer any opinions to interrupt you. We're going to let you complain and let it out. And in exchange, we may or may not offer. That could happen. That's what it seemed like that happened in that situation. And I've been in that one. and what you're going to actually do about it from there is a big deal. Like, look, can you stop it before it goes any further? Because we don't want to enjoy your company. We don't want to entertain your company if this is going to continue. That's basically what that's telling me. But she also said, compassion, that's all she needs. Is the modern society relies on a therapist and not social human connection. Well, that's kind of contradictory, because even if you use a therapist, that is still that's a social construct. That is a human connection. Someone who needs to be unbiased and not feel what you feel or have an opinion because they know the history of what you've gone through. You know, having it, like you say, if you have an outside voice or a mind really observing who has no personal feelings to your problem and saying maybe you are the problem, that's difficult. Jenny, you unmiked or unmuted. Is there something you wanted to add?
What I wanted to say is that if you're a grown ass person and you're still whining, you have a problem.
Okay.
Because whining and complaining about something is two different things. So if you're a whiner, that's a person that just likes to get things their way. If it doesn't go right, they start whining. So people like that, I keep away from. Well, because if you want to be a whiner and a little bitch, then you go in your little section over there and you can do that all by yourself. So I don't deal with people like that. And with this app, I've noticed a lot of people get very personal when other people talk or say their own opinion or whatever the hell they want to say. And I can understand, it gets to you or it gets to other people. But like I told you, and I told this to a lot of people, this is an audio app. People are going to say the strangest, stupidest, dumbest things on here. And you just got to take it like a grain of salt, throw it off your shoulder and go to the next. Because if you're going to get your emotion, feelings, and everything that people say here, you are going to drive yourself fucking crazy.
Well, doesn't that apply to regular life too? Do you talk?
Well, yeah, but that's your regular life. But you're not going to include strangers in your regular life with the bullshit that you go with. You know what I'm saying?
Many people don't, right? Many people don't.
No, many people don't.
But there are a populace. It's growing. It's not just taking place on social audio. It's taking place everywhere. It just you may not be aware of it, or your attention, your narrow focus.
No, I'm aware of it. I just don't make it a priority that I have to do something about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If they want to do it, that's on them. I really don't care. As long as you don't bother my little cocoon and my fun time here, we're good. But once you do that, you know what I do. You know what I do, Jason. Come on, you know me.
Well, okay, what I'm telling you right now will also just remind you I'm recording live on YouTube. It's so people on YouTube, what she's talking about, if you're not in social audio app, what tends to take place is people express their different points of lives, their thoughts, their feelings, and they can live under a sense of being anonymous. They can make up their personality, and then they can take parts of their lives, their problems, their issues, and they can live it out and think that it's not going to hurt anyone, or they feel like they're going to be heard or vindicated or validated. But it's not much different whether it's a social audio app or living in presence. When you complain to people, what is that complaint? When you place that complaint, when you place that issue in somebody else's hand, what are they going to do about it? Can you accept what they're going to do? If they say, oh, you know what, thanks for telling me, Jenny, it's not something I want to talk about. If they said that, can you respect that? There is a population of people that will get offended just by even hearing that and have a problem with you saying that. And I call them snowflakes.
That sounds like a them problem. That sounds like a them problem, to be fair.
Yeah, that sounds like
another thing that they can whine about. Give them something.
Right. Like, to me, I've had a lot of self-reflection in the last couple of days, and I realized, okay, my choices and my actions are going to be redirected for a positive experience. My feelings are a negative reflection of what I decided on. Now, can I open my horizons up? Yeah, I can. I totally can. Will I? Yeah, definitely working on it. So it's now about, when I titled this topic of this room and this broadcast is why you should never whine about your station or people. It's to tell you that if it's something you can fix, do it. If it's something you can't fix, leave it. Let it go. It's that simple. Now,
I also think when you constantly talk about something, you're breathing life into that problem. So it's like it's perpetuating it and
yeah, does
keeping
it
it
feed
alive.
it? Yeah, does it feed it?
Yeah.
But you have to be aware that you may be feeding the problem. Looking at your own actions, like if someone points out, well, you know what, you kind of talked about this, or you did this, or this thing. You did this. That's your choice. Don't get mad at how others react to you, because your actions, your words, and your performance of those actions and words, they're only looking at the optics of what they understand, not what you understand. So don't be offended so easily by what people say, which is very difficult for a lot of us, especially when we become more intimate with people, and we become more integrated with people. Because this community, even on Clubhouse, YouTube, wherever I broadcast this to, this is a choice point to connection to billions of people around the world, if they so choose. This is a part of living, whether you like it or not. The world is not such a big place in our minds. It's actually becoming closer and closer. But the reality is, for me to walk, say, like from California to New York, that's a long freaking time. That will take me a long time. But me to talk to people in New York can take less than a second. Me talking to, say, like Chloe, my friend in the UK, takes less than a second. Or talking to Jenny or James, Beth, Wendy, or Judy. Talking to any of those people through an app takes a second, but it's our choice of what we talk about, how we feel about it, what we're going to do about it. Like me, I'm narrowing my focus. Like, instead of me complaining and being mad at people, I could be mad. Yeah. But I'm not going to hold on to that anger. I'm just going to say, okay, what has me disturbed? How long do I want to be disturbed about? And what am I going to process? Do I want to keep up with the frequency of people or things or associations? I have to choose. So, any thoughts, any closing thoughts before I end the show? But thank you guys for coming out. Any, anything you guys like to share?
Well, just a quick one, just to say that I started navigating my friendships based on how I felt around people about 7 or 8 years ago, and it really made life so much easier. For example, if I was around someone and I felt drained or a little bit uncomfortable, or just, I'm aware of that, and I'm like, these are not my people. Obviously, like I said, this is not friends that are going through a hard time, that are venting, that once in a while they need to talk to that's not the situation. I'm talking about people who, that aren't as close. If I'm around someone and I leave the situation feeling drained, I know that that's not my people. Those are not my people.
Right.
And I'm not saying that if it's just once or twice, because everybody's allowed an off day. But if it happens on a consecutive bunch of occasions, and I'm seeing that this, because the thing is, in a way, it's like an energy vampire coming into your life going, I've got all this shit, and what does that do? Drain your life force. It sucks the blood or the life force out of your body, and that doesn't feel good to be around. And some people, I'm not saying everyone, but some people just love a good moan, and you've got to be careful of those people, because they'll moan to anybody who'll listen. So if you listen to them, you're actually encouraging it and you're enabling that behavior. So, but obviously, this is when you know somebody really well, and you know where they're coming from. This isn't somebody that you've just met or whatever, because you don't know them. So you
Right.
have nothing to base it on. But even if I meet somebody in rooms like this, like I meet someone and I engage with them and I enjoy engaging with them, I'll follow them. If I don't enjoy it, I'm probably not going to talk to them ever
And you
again.
can and you can unfollow them later. Like, look, it was a one-time good time, okay, and then you find out they're a negative Nelly. Like, well, thanks, it was good to know you, but that's where I add and delete or unfollow people all the time. But what it is different from, say, like if someone had just lost their husband or their wife or their child. There is traumatic events that deserve empathy and understanding. But if you're living it out every day for the next 30 days of your life, that's maybe a time to say, you know what, I need to evaluate this. What am I not letting go? What am I staying attached to? Because people get attached to their pains. So anyone else care to add before I close out?
One of the things I noticed in business, a lot of people believe there should be an open door policy. And my biggest problem with that open door policy is the complaints that come with it. So we've adopted a company policy. Is it a nuisance or is it a problem? Because if it's a nuisance, then live with it and don't bring it up again. If it's a problem, how can we resolve it? And what are you going to do to take action to resolve that issue? So these open door policies have literally stopped happening, because when I empower people to fix the problem, I didn't have to hear about the problems. All I got to hear about was the successes and the wins we had.
Right. And I definitely appreciate that. Anything from you, Jenny, before I close out?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, you guys. Well, we'll see you all next time on my Stoic Circus. It'll probably be Wednesday or Thursday. I'll post that schedule. And for YouTube listeners and followers, if you want to join the Clubhouse experience, feel free to stop over in Clubhouse, look up 72 the Architect, and look for my Stoic Circus. And that's where you'll hear the live broadcast. Anyhow, you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.